I'm so grateful for this practice, for being here on this Thursday together. That was an intimidating list of headlines that Roshi read last night, or it could be. If you haven't listened to the Wednesday talk, please do when you have a chance. But here we are with this amazing karma of being together on a Thursday in the midst of all those broad headlines and in the midst of all the headlines of our own lives. This is very loud. And yet we also have the karma to be here together with the microphone attacking us. So before I start talking about the reading that we're working with this session, as we're just beginning this session, everyone just take a moment and deeply appreciate the karma that's brought you here today. Appreciate this breath, this cushion, the aching knees, the 4:45 a.m. bell. That in the midst of everything and not separate from anything, we're here right now, together, but ultimately alone. Ultimately alone. How, and when we are ultimately alone, in the midst of everything, do we find what's true? And how do we live that way? Great karma that we're here to figure it out together, right? Like, appreciate it. I mean, really, my God. All the other lives. Last night, Roshi gave a Teisho about, about just that, wasn't it? But we looked at a passage from this Cultivating the Empty Field book. If you were here in June, we looked at another passage from this book, or if you listened to the talks. It was June, it was beautiful, breezy, windy weather, and we talked about breezing through the world in that samadhi that the patch-robed monks freely enter. And, we talked about some about this book itself and the poetry of the book. Reverend Shokai gave a beautiful talk on the poetry of this book and brought us many other beautiful examples. And this book is really remarkable. I mean, you truly can open it to any page and just be fully absorbed by it, by the beauty. And as Roshi pointed out, Hongji wrote these words in the midst of his own crazy list of headlines, right? The war, the refugees. It was catastrophic. And of course, out of any catastrophe like that comes the famine, right? So very hungry people, crops are not growing. There's not the labor to grow crops. And I actually read in this book that Hongji was known for his huge monastery, 1,200 monks, and just a couple Dharma heirs. But that monastery would take food to the village to share what little they had. And Hongji himself would eat one meal a day in an effort to be of use and of help in a very tangible way. And I just thought that was really relevant to last night's talk. This empty field and what activity comes up out of it. So I really appreciate this book and Hongxi's words. And I remember a few years ago, actually, Doan Roshi read something to us on a Thursday night at Sesshin. And sometimes you hear those words at Sesshin and they just fully melt into you, and there's just no separation of you and the words and the speaker of the words. And I tracked her down. She loves it when I track her down. Because I had to know what the source of where did this come from? Where did these words come from? And she just showed me this book and closed the door. And I went and ordered the book, right? So, breezing through the world in June. And in July here, it's quite a bit warmer with less breeze. The forest is very lush. The woods are beautiful. Please enjoy the extended kinhin this session. The mosquitoes aren't bad yet. So deep in the summer, we're looking at a different passage in the book, just a few pages later. It's called A Plowman on the Shining Field. And I'll read the whole passage here. From the outset, patch-robed monks, practitioners of the way, have this field that is a clean, spacious, broad plain. Gazing ahead, beyond any precipitous barriers, within the field, they plow the clouds and sow the moon. With clear, bright understanding, the wisdom mirror mind, vast and expansive, the true self accepts its function, whether emerging or disintegrating, whether in a position of receiving or releasing. Directly perform the same workings as earth and heaven, yin and yang, arising and dispersing along with the 10,000 forms. Lofty and majestic, where do they come from? Still in solitude, where do they go? So we are told the empty sky cannot encompass it, the great earth cannot uphold it. Subtly existing beyond shapes, perfectly empty beyond names, the merit of being and non-being is exhausted. The paths of the worldly and the sages are transcended. Then you have the opportunity to go home. Just then, what do you know? For 150,000 acres, you can see the cold, pure, shining snow. Observing this well, one can be a strong plowman. So it's a lot to unpack, and our teachers will do it better in the coming days. But here's the thing. It could just say from the onset, period. That could be the whole talk. From the onset. Beginningless time, like Roshi talked about. Endless time. From the onset, this shining field is already there. Oh, and yet we search and search and search, and the energy and the time and the striving and the books and the talks and the conversations and the wailing and the gnashing of teeth, right? Not outside the field. This vast luminous field, as Roshi said, is mind, universal mind, pure awareness. Do you know your Lankavatara list? Buddha nature, thusness, suchness, I have it written down, vastness, warm-hearted spaciousness, clear bliss light, wisdom, mirror mind, tathagata garbha. And as Doan is always telling us, this field, recognizing this field, abiding in this field, activity from this field is our birthright. And by nature, what already exists can't be cultivated. But it can get kind of covered up, right? There's maybe some plowing to do. This is kind of where the plowing comes in, right? Gazing ahead beyond any precipitous barriers, within the field they plow the clouds and sow the moon. So we might not all be born in Ohio, but we are all, at least in Ohio for a minute here. And you've probably seen some plowing. I used to live by a field. They usually plowed after I washed the windows. But this plowing clouds and sowing the moon, planting the moon, sowing the moon. Within the field, they plow the clouds and sow the moon. This is not graspable, right? This is not a matter for the intellect, not something to figure out. It's something to know for yourself, which comes back to my very first point of appreciate our karma of practicing this sesshin together. When I read this line, it brought up immediately for me the koan, with hands of emptiness I take up the plow. Walking I ride the water buffalo. This shiny field is not passive. It's not vacant. It's from where all activity arises. The shining field takes food to the village. The shining field sits with the dying mother, grieving friend. Shining field sits and stays with the kleshas, seeing through it, stays on the cushion, stays with the difficult conversation, does not eject. This is the shining field's activity. And when I was thinking about plowing, so I was thinking when I lived by the field and how they would come by pretty much when the Windex went back in the cupboard, they're not adding anything to the field, right? They're turning it over. They're revealing, softening the soil, letting the water and the seeds get in, right? And this is what we practice. We're just uncovering what's already there, over and over and over again. From the outset, it's unattainable, cannot be cultivated. There is nothing to cultivate. Hongji says, we must only recognize it and not allow our busy, mischievous thinking to interfere with our own radiant clarity. Does anybody have any busy, mischievous thinking? And I know you do. I know I do. And Hongji did too. And he knew busy, mischievous thinking well. So if we want to be rid of this conditioning, which can yank us around so easily, right? We have to sit through it. We have to sit with it, see through it, and not try to run away from it. Facing everything, let go and attain stability. Stay with that just as that. Stay with this just as this. Because even when we recognize and realize this shiny field, like the karmic habit energy will just throw us back into our conditioned responses. Like we all can think of a specific example of this. Right? So that's why we practice. That's why we have Sesshin. It helps. We do it because it helps. We have to learn to be still and how to stay. And we have to learn it over and over and over again. We have to practice it because like this staying business is no joke. It is not easy. Sometimes it is excruciating to sit with yourself as you are. And can you stay? Right? In this practice, we talk about edges. There's all kinds of edges. Some are pretty blunt and easy to talk about. And some of them are so sharp, they feel like they cut you through your bones. We were talking about edges in an interview this morning. And we came to realize that edges don't have to mean grudges against ourself, against our noble friends. When we can practice those edges together, we can really find something true in there. So there's a saying in Zen, you probably heard, shake out your sleeves and go. And it has a lot of different meanings, right? There's a lot of layers in there. Some are total freedom, some are blind arrogance, right? But the Roshis and I have been talking in the past few weeks about fold your sleeves nicely and stay. What does that look like? I don't mean like stay in your bad situation or stay a doormat or stay anything like that. I'm talking about staying with reality. Fold up your sleeves nicely and stay with your reality. And we can only do that when we learn to really settle down. To sit in stillness in the midst of the headlines of our newspapers and our minds, sitting still right there. Stay with that as that, and stay with this as just this. Last month at Sesshin, we were talking a lot about filling your seat, right? Not overfilling and not underfilling, and being at the center of your own mandala of your life. And sometimes there's such a temptation to eject, isn't there? I don't really want to be at the center of this particular mandala, thank you. Where else will you go? Years will just go by. And then we'll die. So appreciating the karma of being able to practice and being able to plow that field. Also not a joke. So this stillness, I just really like this, so I'm just kind of share something else I read in this book. Hongji's first teacher was named Kumu, and they said that Kumu would sit so still that he resembled a block of dry wood. And his name meant dry wood, complete Dharma. And this is how Hongji learned to sit, right? But I think we have to understand that sitting still as a block of dry wood, as still as a block of dry wood, is not dead. That is that is alive sitting. Sitting as still as a block of dry wood. That's inner and outer silence, inner and outer stillness. Yeah, I mean, that is the staying. That's the sleeves folded nicely and staying. And we have to have that stillness. We have to have the equanimity, right? We talk about Kensho, we talk about awakening. That's what we're doing. This is the project, awakening. We have to cultivate that stillness and that equanimity, right, to experience this Kensho. And that's all great, but then we have to train it. Like, we have to train it so that it can show up in our lives. It doesn't matter if it doesn't show up in your lives as compassion, as activity, as the empty field taking food to the village. As not being separate, not separate from any of those headlines, not distancing, not putting up a grudge where there's just an edge. This heart, this compassion, I don't mean pity, like not pity. This actual compassion that comes up out of the field, rises out of emptiness, wisdom, rises as activity, compassionate activity, which doesn't always look how we think it should look. Like, pity's pretty comfortable. It usually looks the way we think it's going to look. It looks nice, right? It looks like doing something nice for somebody. But what is compassion? What is true compassion? Love with a capital L. Hongji shared the monastery food out of awakened activity, not out of pity, with hands of emptiness taking up the plow. And we do have help, right? We have help every stage of the way, with each other, with the Sangha, our teachers, with Tara. This asking for help, I've really been working with this lately myself. And I'm really starting to feel a difference between asking for help, but I'm going to still figure it out, and I don't know. Handing it over. Like, actually handing it over to Tara. Right? Because I don't know. And we don't know in this way. We hand it over. In this way, we get to merge into this, right? We get to directly enter this Sambhogakaya bliss space. And it's really easy to trick ourselves into thinking the mundane, not knowing, I don't know what to do about this problem, but I'm going to ask Tara for help, and then I'm going to get it figured out, and we're going to get it all done, is that. And this is not that. That is not this. So, with clear, bright understanding, wisdom, mirror mind, as Roshi showed us, vast and expansive, the true self accepts its function. The true self accepts its function. Whether emerging or disintegrating, whether in a position of receiving or releasing, stay with that just as that. Stay with this just as this. The true self accepts its function. Whether healing or becoming ill, whether recovering, falling down, employed or fired. Stay with that just as that. Stay with this just as this. Whether married or single or widowed or divorced, by choice or by not choice, welcome or unwelcome, angry or sad or blissful. Every state that arises, every state temporary, every state not separate, just stay with that as that, and this as this. The true self is not obsessed with differentiating these things, not fighting these things, merging with function. Whether in a position of receiving or releasing. Directly perform the same workings as heaven and earth, yin and yang, arising and dispersing along with the 10,000 forms, not separate from them. Not just the ones you like, not just the easy ones. The forms, the 10,000 forms. Arising and dispersing. These forms, lofty and majestic, the nation flourishes. Where do they come from? Still in solitude, the nation perishes. Where does it go? So we are told that the empty sky cannot encompass it. The great earth cannot uphold it. You know, joy comes, grief dissipates, joy dissipates. Your role changes, rises as this, falls away as that. Identities come and go. Change is change. In our practice, it's not to try to escape that at all, but to become so deeply intimate with it. So deeply intimate with it that subtly existing beyond shapes, perfectly empty without names, the merit of being and non-being is exhausted. The paths of the worldly and the sages are transcended. It's just staying with that as just that, And this is just this. Intimate. Then you have the opportunity to be home. It says to go home, but I like to be home. To know your home. In that moment of being home, what do you know? What's outside of this? This activity, this functioning. With hands of emptiness, I take up the plow. For 150,000 acres, that's a lot. You can see the cold, pure, shining snow, the shining field. Observing this well, one can be a strong plowman or woman. At Sesshin, Rinzin always says, whatever comes up is exactly perfect, exactly what needs to come up. Stay with that just as that. Stay with this just as this. Because being home with yourself, alone. I alone am the world-honored one. This is not the same as relying on a person or a book or a podcast of wonderful Dharma talks. This is not the same as those things. This is finding what truth you can really rely on. What's not separate. What is true? From the onset, patch-robed monks have this field that is clean, spacious, and broad plain. Gazing ahead, beyond any precipitous barriers, within the field they plow the clouds and sow the moon. With clear, bright understanding, vast and expansive, the true self accepts its function, whether emerging or disintegrating, whether in a position of receiving or releasing. Directly perform the same workings as earth and heaven, yin and yang, arising and dispersing along with the 10,000 forms. Lofty and majestic, where do they come from? Still in silence, where do they go? So we are told that the empty sky cannot encompass it, the great earth cannot uphold it, subtly existing beyond shapes, perfectly empty beyond names. The merit of being and non-being is exhausted. The paths of the worldly and the sages are transcended. Then you have the opportunity to be home. Just then, what do you know? For 150,000 acres, you can see the cold, pure, shining snow. Observing this well, one can be a strong plowman. Dedicate the merit of this Dharma talk and this time together to all of those all those beings who desperately need to practice, want to practice, and are seeking practicing teachings in the Dharma. May our merit go to the removal of all obstacles, all obstructions, and may it be for the full and complete awakening of all beings with no exceptions. May it be so.